let's get started. We are going to start on time as the time of our panelists are quite precious. So we'll delve deep into our sales, marketing, and communications panel. Welcome to yet another Opportunities and What You Need to Know series in partnership with SFU Alumni Relations, the BD School of Business, Career and Volunteer Services, and Work Integrated Learning Offices at SFU. Today, we're pleased to present to you the Sales, Marketing, and Communications Sector panel. My name is Naz Bawaipana, and I'm a career advisor at the Undergraduate Career Management Center here at the BD School of Business, and I'll be moderating the panel discussion today. I am joining you from my home office, which is located on the traditional territory of the Coquitlam First Nations, which lies within the shared territories of Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, Musqueam, Squamish, and the Stalo Nations. We are grateful to be able to live and play and learn on these traditional territories. And of course, we will embark on quite a bit of learning from our expert panel today about the world of sales, marketing, and communications. And for that, we're truly blessed. I am also joined by my colleague and the manager of the Career Management Center, Daryl Odo, who will be moderating this session and taking questions from the participants and our attendees. So if you have any questions from our panelists, feel free to utilize the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen and ask your questions there. And we will open the floor for questions from the attendees at the end of the panel. We are going to be sharing the recording of this session, and it will be posted at a later time. So you feel free to utilize this and review the content. But I would also encourage you to share this along with your peers and colleagues and spread the word, and especially for those who might have not had the opportunity to attend the session today. We'd appreciate that. Without further ado, welcome to our sales, marketing, communications sector panelists. We're all former SFU alumni. And I do want to take this moment first and foremost to thank you for forking out the time out of your busy schedules and being here today, willing to share your expertise in the field and essentially contributing to our community, our SFU community. I, for one, am very much looking forward to learning from all of you today, and I'm sure that the attendees are just as eager to learn from you as well. I will let our participants take some time to introduce themselves, their current role and areas of specialty, and anything fun that you'd like to share about yourself. So let's start off with Andrea. I think you might be
I'm muted. Hi, I'm Andrea Coutu. I'm the CEO of Trust Mode Marketing as well as Consultant Journal. I specialize in working with government and industry programs for entrepreneurs, and I am an alumni of the English and Communication programs for my undergrad at SFU, as well as the Communication Co-op program and the Executive MBA. I was also worked for the athletics department in PR when I was an undergrad, and I've been a sessional instructor for BD as well as for the SFU publishing program. Fun fact, I was the kid who franchised their Kool-Aid stand and had other kids working for them. So I've been in entrepreneurship for quite a while. It's an honor to be here.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andrea. And let's move over to Jessica.
Awesome. So my name is Jessica, and I'm currently an account executive at Salesforce, focusing specifically with healthcare and life science organizations. I graduated I graduated with a BBA in Marketing and Management Information in 2017. So only been in the workforce for a couple of years. Fun fact, when it's non-COVID times, I do like to get into the ring and do a little bit of boxing and work out the frustrations of the day.
I would have never thought that, Jessica, and I've known you as a student too. That's amazing. Good for you on that. Let's move over to Tony.
Thank you. Hi guys. So my name is Tony, and I'm from TELUS. So I've been with the company for about 7 years now. Half of those 7 years in marketing, and most recently in sales. Now leading a group of account managers in the mid-market space, and we acquire new businesses in the 30 to 100 employee space. Fun fact is currently I'm wearing a nice fully ironed out white dress shirt, but on the bottom I've got the most comfortable Uniqlo sweatpants on at home.
I second that, Tony. Thanks for sharing. Makes us all comfortable to share that too. Awesome. And last but not least, Mr. Adam, take it away.
Thanks for having me. My name is Adam Brayford, and I'm the Senior Communications Manager at Banana Tag, which is an internal comms platform based out of Vancouver, but that works with big companies like IKEA, Samsung, Volvo, all around the world. I am an alum of the School of Communication and co-op, the co-op program, amazing as well, loved it. And what else? I was racking my brain for something fun about myself, and to my horror, I couldn't think of one thing. But one thing that's fun about the office that I do have access to at Banana Tech here now, because it's normally an office that holds 70 people and only 3 of us are using it right now. And so we each get our own wing. But my wing, I overlook this residential building across the street. And we're in this beautiful new building, so the windows are all tinted. And all of these people in this residential building think there's no one in this building. So all day, every day, there are just naked people left, right, and center in every window. We have a Slack thread about it at work. It's very entertaining. So thought I'd share that fun little anecdote with you.
That is hilarious. Thank you sharing. Thank you for sharing that, Adam. And I do see a little bit of that overlook. So
Yeah.
that is going to be interesting. Awesome.
This is the
Fantastic.
professional wing.
Yes, great. Good to know. Thank you to all of our panelists for your introductions and sharing a little bit of fun snippets about yourself. As mentioned, we do have a series of pre-prepared questions, so I'll pose those to our panelists and for our attendees. Again, some of you trickled in a little bit later. You do have a Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, so you're more than welcome to use that and send in your questions, or if you have specific questions from our panelists, submit those there. And Daryl, my colleague, will be moderating the Q&A session. So we will move over to our audience questions at the end of the session together. All right, so to kick things off and perhaps a little bit more of an expansion, essentially, of your introduction, can you please talk about your career path while in school and after graduation, and what led you to where you are today?
Sure. Let me think. When I was still a co-op student, I started freelancing, and I did co-op. I worked for Immigration Canada in Hull, Quebec, as well as in Ottawa in a double term. I worked for Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and then I did a double co-op at BC Hydro. I convinced them to let me do 5 co-ops. And I also worked in the athletics department doing a lot of PR and working with sportscasters here and throughout the US for SFU. And while I was on my first co-op term, I published an article in the Ottawa Citizen. And from there, I built out freelance writing and consulting opportunities. And by the time I graduated, I went into an entrepreneurship program, one of the first that they ever had for youth, and started a consulting business. I optimized my website somehow, just a fluke. No one was doing stuff like that. And I landed at the top in the world for marketing consultant, as well as for high-tech consultant. And I got Hewlett Packard as one of my first clients. They didn't know I was 23. They weren't paying me what a 23-year-old usually makes. And they asked me if I knew how to do routers and switches and hubs and things like that. So while they were asking me that question, I typed in, what is a hub, in Ask Jeeves, which was one of the first search engines. They decided they'd interview me the next day. So I ran across the street to Chapters and got a book called How Wireless Works. And that is how I launched my career in high tech. And from there, I grew my business. I did sometimes take a step out and work in the software industry or as a sessional instructor and so on. And over time, I founded a website because I was getting so many students coming to my site because I was top for marketing consultant. And so I founded Consultant Journal, and I've grown that. I get between 20 and 60,000 visitors a month, and I sell books and courses, and kind of took the software industry concept to build something once and sell it over and over. And of course, I'd taken publishing courses at SFU. So that's kind of how I landed where I am.
Yeah, and I can jump in and give a more, I guess, more student-focused experience as well. So I started at SFU in 2012. During my 5 years there, I also did co-op. I didn't do a full 3-semester term, but had a bit of work experience. I dabbled a lot in the Student Marketing Association right from the get-go, knowing that I wanted to explore marketing. It's something that I had exposure in high school with and wanted to continue running into or continue pursuing it. So that's honestly where I got my first little touch of sales. For any of the students who are involved in student organizations, you have to do boothing and you have to sell tickets to events and really get students to part ways with money when you don't make much money. And honestly, I think that's where the first bit of the hustle really came through, even in clubs day, pushing SMA, telling people to sign up, come to our icebreakers. That's where kind of everything started for me, but I was still very much on kind of a marketing path, wanting to explore that further. And then I did a couple co-ops in it and kind of realized that for me personally, I wanted something that was a little bit more competitive, that I could just go head to head with somebody and know where I stand. That's why I got involved in case competitions. Peter Tinkling was actually one of my case coaches, and we went to Spain together in my last semester, which was just a great cherry on top of kind of wrapping up the whole BD experience. And that really put me in a place where, you understand that you're more so in a consultant phase, and selling isn't always about pushing a product. It's more so understanding somebody's needs and providing a solution. And if your solution isn't what they need, then being okay with walking away from that. So I think that's where I first got a bit of exposure of solution selling, which is what we do here at Salesforce, is really understanding, what are the needs? What are the requirements? Is this a good fit? If it's not, then that's perfectly okay. So right now, after school, what I did was, or during school, I did a lot of networking, and I knew, kind of like Andrea, that I wanted to work in tech. The first thing that I wanted to do was move to San Francisco, because where else better to be in the tech world? But it was also 2016, 2017, and right before I was about to graduate, Trump got elected. The visa thing was just very unsure. So it was really hard for me to either, one, find a job, two, convince myself that there was enough stability that I would be able to stay there and build my career. So with the Silicon Valley kind of out of the window, I looked at, what can I do in Canada? I knew that I didn't particularly want to stay in Vancouver. I wanted to move away since I had grown up here, get a bit of different experience. And in my networking, or one of my mentors had told me, go network with the people with the people who work at companies that you want to work at. And my list had Google, Facebook, Salesforce, every big tech company out there. And luckily, because of the part-time job that I took with a marketing consultancy, they had really good connections. And also, I just did the classic student thing, cold reach out to somebody on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm a graduating student. I'd love to learn more about your experience. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the door with Salesforce. There was an account executive here at the office in Vancouver, and we just kept doing coffee chats and had a really good relationship. And when it came to the point where I was graduating, I was like, hey, would you be open to referring me? And he's like, without a doubt. So I applied, first of all, for an internship in Toronto, because there weren't a lot of beginning roles in sales in here. And I knew that I wanted to learn from a big company, first of all. And, that would be a really great jumping or like a trampoline for me, stepping stone, whatever it may be. So I got an internship there. It was very not concrete. It was 4 months long, and I had never been to Toronto, and they gave me 3 weeks to move. So I packed up my life and I did a blind move to Toronto for 4 months. But I knew in my heart that I'm going to make this work. So I signed a lease before my 4 months was up for a year. And then the rest was kind of history. And I've been technically stationed in Toronto ever since. I climbed up through the ranks, learned how to qualify leads, learned how to build projects and cold call hospitals in the East Coast where they had no money. And now I have my own territory and my own customers, as well as prospecting. So really taking the baby steps and learning all the grunt work that is within sales and learning what it takes to close a deal.
Thank you both so much for sharing that. And, you know, it's great to see how you've taken the initiative, right? Whether it's through going across the street and buying that book that you really need, or doing extracurricular involvement and getting yourself really in those situations, doing networking, putting yourself out there, and taking charge of your own career development, right? Nobody's going to have that magic wand and put you in the role that you really want. You got to take charge of that. So it's great to kind of see those initiatives coming from the experience of both of you. So thank you for sharing that. Now, of course, pivoting a little bit towards a bit more of a COVID-based working environment. We're all working at a virtual space together, where many of us are managing the current situation with the pandemic, finding ourselves, you know, working or studying from home. What is one tip you'd have for someone working or studying or essentially starting a new role remotely?
My biggest tip is separate like your bedroom from your workspace. Have a place where, you know, this is where I'm going to be productive and this is where I'm going to go relax. I know it's really hard because home is where you're supposed to be relaxing, but having a separation is going to help you put yourself into that mind state where this is where I'm going to be productive.
Tony?
Yeah, I didn't know if I was supposed to go yet. No, that's great. And I actually echo that sentiment. And you know, I currently, you know, live in a pretty small apartment here, but then it's so important, like Jessica said, to just kind of carve out your own area with a proper workstation, right? Because you are spending the whole day there. But the one tip I had was stay connected with colleagues. So this is not new to me. Like, it's really different because we're in a pandemic now, and you know, we've never been through something like this. But in terms of working remotely, I actually started with TELUS and marketing in 2013, and it was a work from home position off the start. So my boss was actually in Edmonton at the time. So, but you know, at that time it was a new role, brand. You know, I have to network, and I really wanted to be in the office, but I didn't have that chance. But especially now in 2020, with all this digital transformation and all these you know, virtual workplaces available at your leisure, you should really go out of your way to stay connected with the colleagues. Or if you're new on board, then definitely, you know, reach out and try to have that video meeting with them, because you know, you're not going to know too many people, and you might have frequent meetings with your boss or your immediate mentor, but you don't have the luxury of, you know, being able to just go for a 5-minute coffee or beer after a work. So you know, for example, like for us, so we just onboarded a bunch of new sales representatives, and you know, we started this social Thursday virtually, where we'll just grab a cocktail or whatever beverage you like, and we'll get on video. And after work, we're not talking work, but just personally, we're connecting. We're talking about, you know, what's going on outside of work too. So and I think that helps with engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing those tips. And I think for, you know, for some of us who get our energy from working with people, right, and engaging with team members, whether it's, you know, our student body or some of us working from home, now having to revert and utilize a virtual platform to do that is definitely not the same. And it can create that burnout effect or have a mental or, you know, physical burnout effect, essentially, right? So employing some of these tips that you've shared is definitely great. So thank you for that. Moving over to a bit more of a sector-specific set of questions. In your opinion, how has the sales, marketing, and communications industry changed in the past 5 years? What trends, innovations, or shifts have you noticed, especially within a COVID workplace environment? A bit of a loaded question. Anybody like to tackle that?
Well, have you heard of Ask Jeeves? Yeah, I've seen a few trends over the last 10 or so years. I mean, in the early 2010s, it was all about the introduction of the digital strategist role. Everyone was trying to figure out how they can respond to digital transformation. And then those started to be more integrated into your overall communications and marketing team, because digital is just an expectation of communications and marketing. But if there's one thing that I think can't be denied in the last 5 years or so, it's the rise of internal communications. And I'm not just saying that because of where I work now, but what I mean by that is a company's communication with their people. So their employees, their contractors, the stakeholders that they work with. it was always considered kind of the little sibling of external communications or marketing, because it was, thought to have a greater ROI, bigger and sexier and viewed kind of externally. But here, often in North America, internal communication is being done off the side of someone's desk, depending on what organization you're in. But especially during COVID, there's a real focus on employee experience. So your people in your company are your biggest asset. Happy, engaged employees are productive employees. It equals more profit, and it just makes people want to stay working for you longer. And communication plays a big role in that. So if you look at some of the studies that come out of places like Gatehouse in the UK, they're expecting a continued rise of internal comms in the years to come. So I think if you really want to prepare yourself for that, and really just even if you're in marketing, if you're in sales, just how the interplay between internal and external happens, I think it's all about getting comfortable speaking with the leaders within your company, asking really good questions, helping them identify potential risks if they don't communicate strategically with their people, so that you can help translate complex policies into authentic, transparent, two-way communication in an organization. So I'll get off my soapbox, but that's definitely a shift that I've seen in communication over the last 5 years.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Adam. No, those are phenomenal tips. And I think with the pandemic, it's kind of created that comfort where you expect people to reach out to you, and you're also expected to reach out to individuals too, whether it's within the community, externally within other organizations. So it's great to see that having played out in the industry as well, especially now within the COVID context.
Yeah, it's okay if your CEO's wearing a sweatshirt. Like that's normal now. They can be vulnerable. It's not the same workplace we were in a year ago.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Now, looking a little closely at the industry, what do you think are some misconceptions that people have about these fields? What is it that we don't know, essentially?
I remember in school, I never really considered sales as a career that I wanted to go into, because when you think about sales, I think a lot of people think about that like greasy car salesperson who's just trying to push something and make you buy something that you don't maybe need, and they just like to make things look better than it actually is. So I never really thought about sales, but the reason why I kind of fell into it is I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, and sales gave me the opportunity to get a lot of exposure into all kinds of industries and businesses of all sizes, and learn about how they run and see if this is where I see myself, this is where the passion lies, or where my skill sets are actually well suited. And lo and behold, still in sales 3 years later, not planning to leave anytime soon, kind of finding my sweet spot here. So I would say, first and foremost, there's a lot that you learn in sales that is universally applicable across the board. You are listening, you're trying to understand what people actually want. Whenever you're ever client facing, or even you're in-house, you're still trying to figure out like, what are our goals here, and trying to figure out what is the solution. Is the solution doing X? Is it doing Y? And then in that process of having your own customers, or implementing something alongside, you become a project manager. And then you realize that you have to juggle all these people's schedules. You're not even on their payroll, but trying to get all these voices in the room to understand what are we actually trying to do. So a lot of that is really rooted in communications, and in every single role, you're going to have to learn to, one, convey your own thoughts, two, understand what somebody's trying to say, even if it's reading between the lines, or maybe it's calling out that they don't actually know what they want. And in that, because of the foundation, because of the experience I've had, I know for me personally, like I'm in a place, or anyone in sales is in a place, to kind of jump into a different role and be able to tackle it because of all the soft skills you learn, and in such a small time span and such intensity, because all you're doing is running these projects for your customers, for your prospects. And then also at the end of the day, I think you just never run out of stories too. You meet people from all different walks of life, and you get a really good understanding about, what makes somebody tick, and where their passions lie. And I think at the end of the day, that just makes, you a better communicator, you're a better listener, a better partner in life. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions about somebody who's going into sales, but at the end of the day, like, I think it's applicable. Everything you learn is applicable across the board, and it's also a great launch pad for anything. And let's be honest here, you make a lot of money in sales really quickly. So if that's somebody's goal, there's also no kind of taboo about talking about how much somebody makes or money in sales. Whereas I know it's pretty taboo in certain industries, but you can go into a sales interview, and when the manager says, "Why do you want to work here?" you can tell them, "I want to make a lot of money," and there's just mutual respect on the table.
Thanks, Jessica, for shedding light on an important topic, because I also find that it is a common misconception. It's sales, yucky, right? A lot of individuals associate sales with not something that could yield anything beneficial or have any value proposition to their overall career development, which is not true, because as you mentioned, it is a stepping stone into learning the operational aspects of an organization, which you clearly highlighted and demonstrated through your own experience. That's key, right? You want to work for an organization, you got to learn about the products, you got to learn about the services to be able to showcase that value proposition. And sales is that great stepping stone into some of those pieces. So thank you for highlighting that. Just a quick note before we get going. Thank you all for sharing some of your questions through the Q&A feature at the bottom. Just make sure that you're also more than welcome to look at the questions that have come through. And if you're interested in one or two or all those questions, you can use the thumb up icon, and that would indicate the number of you who are interested in our panelists answering that particular question. So feel free to utilize that feature. It kind of expedites the question to the top of the list, and we will get through those towards the end of the session. Great. So thank you again, Jessica, for that. And would love to hear a little bit about, some of the challenges, but also opportunities within your sector or your organization right now with respect to sales, marketing, communications, or either one of those areas.
I can jump in because the challenge I'm facing right now is I'm at 13% battery power and my charger isn't working. So I'm going to have to jump off for a second, fix that after this answer. But I think a challenge certainly in communications and marketing is, especially if you are in a corporate environment where you're selling a product, the organizations that we work with, the customers that we have, the prospects we're trying to enter into contact with have been massively impacted by COVID. It is harder to sell most products. So as a communicator, the opportunity there is to really do some good audience research and come up with a strategy that will help your organization reach out to prospects with best fit messaging that's not going to turn them off. I know in the beginning we got some really negative feedback to our salespeople because how can you be reaching out to me right now? There are people around me who are dying. So communication is touchy and is key. From a personal level, traditional networking is undoubtedly harder. There was nothing like going to a networking event and having a glass of wine to just kind of loosen you up and help you kind of meet people. And I think the connections that you're making right now in a networking sense aren't necessarily as deep as they might have been before, because no one wants to be on Zoom all day. So I think, in communications, in marketing, it's about meeting people still. Find professional associations, volunteer with them. You will end up working with people who have been doing what you want to do for a long time, and they'll become great mentors. And then just kind of on the final flip side of that, I would say in some ways, in communication at least, this is the ideal moment for us. We had a customer, a really big customer of Banana Tag, who had to lay off 200 employees on one day during COVID, which was a really difficult moment. The same day, they increased their account with us by double because they recognized we're in a tough place. Internal communication is really important. We're going to be bringing those people back eventually, and we need to make sure that we're really doing something that's meaningful and measured. So I think the opportunity right now, in the midst of all that, to sum it up, geographical barriers are broken down. It's really normal now to be able to reach out to whoever you want, ask them questions. I'm right now doing just general career informational interviews with people in my future dream companies. I'm not planning on leaving this company anytime soon, but it's just a great time to reach out and learn from those people. So yeah, that's the long story non-short. Now I'm going to find a way to plug myself in.
Sounds good, Adam. We'll see you in just a bit. Thanks for sharing that. Great. And for job seekers in the room, here's a question for you. How could job seekers connect with employers now through LinkedIn, virtual job fairs, etc.? I know Adam talked a little bit about connecting with folks in the industry, staying connected and engaged. So what are some of the platforms to facilitate that essentially?
Sure. Well, certainly using LinkedIn is probably first and foremost as the place people are expecting to talk business when they show up. I encourage people to start building their own social media profiles. Curate what you're posting, be conscientious and think about the audience and what you're signaling. But I actually have made lots of professional contacts on Facebook and Twitter, and that's through consistently showing up as an authentic person and adding to conversations and leading with my values. And I find that the people I like to do work with do that too. I think things like virtual job fairs, even commenting in news articles or retweeting things, just start to build your voice and your brand. One of the things I want to acknowledge too is that I get all of this can be really scary. I get that going to university for people can be very scary, that some of you may be in fourth year and may not have figured everything out. I was a working class kid from a small town, grew up in the inner city of that town, had no idea what I was doing at university. I just knew I needed to go and that it was going to help me with meeting my goals. But one of the things I had to learn was the vocabulary of business. And it included a lot of things that I didn't know much about, a lot of class markers and cultural markers. At the time that I was coming through, knowing wine and cars and golf and a lot of status markers were really important. I found that really toxic and overwhelming, but I invested time to learn it. And I memorized all sorts of high-end car models. I spent a lot of time there, but what came through was I have really good relationship skills. So I was able to learn that vocabulary, build relationships with people that I thought weren't going to talk to me. And it's those relationship and communication skills that have held me through my career and that continue to create opportunities now. So if you're reading all these things or hearing these things from us and it sounds really intimidating to be on LinkedIn or to go to a virtual job fair or to send someone an email for an information interview, maybe you're like me and you had never met anyone except your high school teachers and your doctor who had been to university. It can be really intimidating to then reach out and ask for an information interview. So you can start small. You can even just start by asking other people in your co-op program or other students. Just start building relationships, because if you're coming from there, you don't have that same human capital, social capital, we call it, that maybe other people who came from a lot of privilege, but you can build it. And I want people to know that where you start out and where you end up don't have to be the same, and that you can hold space for other people as you go, and that people will recognize when you do that. And that making yourself vulnerable and letting people know that maybe you're nervous about reaching out, people will respond to that. And that's part of your leadership skills. This is all the Brene Brown and Adam Grant and other big speakers. So anyway, I want to put that out there. So.
No, that's amazing, Andrea. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love the idea around building a voice and a brand, but also normalizing the fact that it could be a scary step, because we always, in sort of that North American culture, we say, get out there, talk to people. But there isn't really that recognition that that may not be something that other cultures have been exposed to in the past, or people who come from different backgrounds and different upbringings have been exposed to that. So being cognizant of those pieces as career practitioners have definitely been, something that I take note, and I'm cognizant of that when I advise students. But also starting small, to your point, reaching out to staff, reaching out to your instructors, like your SFU instructors. The majority of them have been working in the field. They have connections. Us as staff members at the CMC can always connect you with someone in the field and make that introduction and connection for you. So you're not alone in this, essentially. And we are all here to help you navigate your career development as you go along. So thanks for sharing that, Andrea. To piggyback off of my last question, what are some skill sets that you would recommend job seekers to develop to succeed in these industries?
Sure. Well, certainly building your relationship and communication skills, your ability to mirror and build rapport are important. I'm a big fan of learning about sales. I think sales is something that most people can learn. It is there's a certain amount of finesse and giftedness that's going to go with that. But I think everybody can learn sales, and that if you're going to be in business, it's a great place to start, and you can take your whole career through sales. But I also think learning cross competencies, learning about other disciplines, learning about other ways of being and living in the world. One of my first co-op terms, I had the honor and privilege of rewriting the immigration guidelines for LGBTQ candidates, refugees to Canada, as well as women. And I got a lot of flack in that job. They gave it to the co-op student because at that time, other people didn't want to be associated with. And it was really hard. It was very othering, and it took a really long time to kind of recover from that process. But what it meant was once I had that skill and that breadth, I could go into places, and by showing I had done this work, I established safety and rapport with other people. And today, in having built out my business, I do work for the federal government, for example, and I get referred clients who come from marginalized and oppressed communities, as well as inclusion projects. So what started out as something really hard where I didn't have skills, eventually has become part of my brand, and where people see safety with me. I have a contract with Community Futures, and they've just referred some people to me because I have a background in trauma-informed practice, and I leaned into a lot of my own lived experience. So while I could come here and tell you to learn how to do VLOOKUP in sorted rows or something like that, I actually think that looking at who you are and your own skills and backgrounds and finding ways to pull them together, to build your voice, to hold space for yourself as well as for others, and build meaningful connections with other people. I didn't know a lot of people when I went off to university, and those friends that I made, I started to build relationships there, and I am still doing work with people I did co-op with roommates from SFU, and they still are the reason I have a lot of the work I did. So I think looking at things in a broad way, and maybe not the way we're always taught to look. It may not be about your skills in finance. It might be the kind of person you are. So.
That is great. And I had 3 skill sets here when I was talking to my recruiter the other day, because we're actually hiring for our new acquisition team. But I think communication was my number 1 there. But Andrea, you've said it beautifully, so I'll pass on that one. And so number 2, what I had was self-motivation. So more than ever, I think, just because everyone's so remote and you're virtual and you don't have that face-to-face interaction or networking ability, just your own grit and your self-motivation is really important. And what I mean by that is if you enter a role, you're going to get the roles and responsibilities and the career planning and all that sort of the formal aspect of it with your manager or your VP, but I think, in addition to that, that's not enough now. And with so many people joining or the workforce, and for the new folks, you gotta shine like in one way or another. And so by that I mean, if it's reaching out to your manager more frequently, or also do skip levels, and that's not something that most people will do when they first join, but just have the courage and be motivated and reach out to the director or VP or even the senior VP, and to try to connect and show that you want to do well, right? And the other aspect of that, number 3, is to be quick and agile. So be adaptive to change, and that's actually one of the philosophies we have in TELUS here. One of the big 4 pillars is embracing change and adapting quickly. So especially now with the pandemic going on, since March till now, our team, we had this roles and responsibility that we've taken on for the last 2.5, 3 years. But since March till now, we probably had to change our roles and responsibility and swivel chair like at least 3-4 times. All of a sudden we were all hands on deck and talking to customers and just doing virtual hugs, not really selling, but contact and coverage approach, talking about our new health app on the iPhone, and all sorts of different activities, right? Not just sales, but I think it all ties at the end back to the communication, because whether you're talking to your own leader or anyone, colleagues in the same company, or your customers, your ability to communicate and showcase what you have to offer is important. So I think communication, self-motivation, and adapt to change, those 3 were the skill sets I have.
That's phenomenal. Thank you. And what I'm hearing is a little bit of that interdisciplinary learning, that continuous learning in different ways of knowing yourself, but also adding to your bag of tricks, right? And being self-reflective. And I don't think as a society we allow enough time for ourselves to be self-reflective in terms of who we are, what are our values, what soft skills and hard skills do we have, but again, what motivates us to do what we do, right? What are we passionate about? So being able to kind of pull all that together, and really learning about the industries that, as a student you want to move into, or somebody who's a recent graduate, some of those entry-level positions that you want to move into. What are some of the qualifications that the recruiters are looking for? So if you're not getting that in your schooling, are you going to then go ahead and take that upon yourself? If you notice that there's a software that you need to learn because you want to move into marketing, or a platform that you need to do, are you teaching that to yourself? Right? Aside from, the communication skills, being agile, what are some of the hard skills that your industry demands of you, and how are you closing off those gaps in that sense? Great. So as we approach the end of our structured questions from our panelists, and before we move over to our audience questions, what advice could you give new graduates and recent alumni to succeed?
You've spent 4 years learning how to research things you know nothing about, and how to work with people you've never met before. And spending 4 years reflecting on subjects even when maybe you don't like them, and sometimes you do. That's an important skill set that you can take with you. And so I encourage you, go look at job descriptions, look for those gaps, figure out how to solve the problem. Can you take a HubSpot course for free? Can you take something on Coursera? Can you go get a book in the library and overnight become a world-class expert on hubs and routers? Actually, you can. Figure out what skills are in demand, and start looking there, and start building relationships with people. Those friends who sat with me during lunch at SFU and in the BC Hydro cafeteria, the immigration horrible food court mall, we're still friends. We still go out for coffee. My friends from that first co-op helped me get my first job when I graduated, and it was an SFU shop. Everybody else who worked there was from SFU. I still do a lot of work with SFU people. I'm currently working with the First Nations Technology Council. Both Denise Williams, the CEO there, and Sasha Hobbs are SFU alum. One on the board of governors for SFU even. So use your brand. You've got this asset, you've got this community. People associate SFU with innovation and communication and connection. It's also got solid business, marketing, communication programs. Leverage those brand assets, build other people and take them with you. You are on a train and you can choose who's on it and bring them with you. And those, I think those connections and the space you hold for the other people, because where you start, if you feel like you're not being included and you don't have those opportunities, if you keep making space for other people, they're going to notice, and eventually there'll be more space for all of you. So that's my advice.
Yeah, I'll jump in too. I've actually just gotten a text from my old colleague, Tony, who heads up the career and volunteer services area there at SFU. And he says he expects to be mentioned as a personal source of inspiration. So there you go, Tony, you are. I would totally echo what Andrea and Tony and Jessica have said. I think right now you're probably feeling stressed out, especially if you're coming up to graduation. I know I did. I had no idea what I wanted to do, although I'd done co-op, so I knew it would be okay and kind of figure it out. But you know, you probably have some wonders about the job market, worried about your opportunities. I would just say it's going to be okay. Take a deep breath. They said the same thing a decade ago when I started to look. We were in the midst of a recession. We were told there would be no job opportunities out there. My friends who didn't go to university were laughing and saying, told you you didn't need to do that SFU thing, you'll be flipping burgers. That wasn't the case. Everything will swing back. Some of us took longer to find jobs, but the world righted itself and we eventually all made it. So if you're still a student and you still have the opportunity, do co-op. I think you've heard this from a number of us. I mean, definitely do co-op. It's a great way to find out even more than what you do like, what you don't like. If not, there are other things you can do. I agree with Andrea. Go out and teach yourself skills. I think that's maybe, I'm realizing it now, one of the biggest things that's helped me is I realized while doing co-op, nobody's going to make sure you learn the skills you need. You have to figure out what they are and just be scrappy and teach yourself. There's ways to do it. You can find places like BrainStation, Coursera, which Andrea mentioned. There's many ways to do it. And then try and find those opportunities to network online. I mentioned professional associations. I'm involved with IABC, that's the comms one, but there's certainly American Marketing Association. There's tons of them. They're a great way to meet people and just start to get a feel for the industry that you're going into. So yeah, I'll leave it with that. And yeah, take a breath every now and then, try and have some fun.
Great, thank you. Especially during the pandemic, right? Be gentle with yourself. It's okay, you'll figure it out. That's great. So some common themes around, connecting, staying connected, finding your voice, finding, who you are, your values, your strengths, but also, taking that initiative and building your skill sets. Those are phenomenal. So that is it for our prepared questions. And thank you to our panelists for sharing their expertise with us today. I had a few questions that came through from the Q&A feature. So let's jump right into those. And for our panelists, feel free to take turns and answer any questions you'd like. And there's one specific question, I believe, depending on the amount of time that we have, that's designated to one of our panelists. So we'll get to that in just a moment. So first question being, if you could go back in time, what would you tell yourself when you just graduated from university? Great question.
I remember having this conversation actually after I graduated with Lisa Higashi, who is one of my mentors. She's still at BD. She was my manager during one of my co-op terms. And we were talking about professionalism and what professionalism actually means. I remember being in school and thinking that it means putting on a blazer, being stiff, and being proper the entire time. But actually, the biggest piece of advice that I would give anybody is just be yourself in a workplace. You're going to learn what professionalism means, and but the most important thing is to be yourself, because at the end of the day, that's who people want to work with, and that's what makes work enjoyable. Anybody can do the job. Technically, you can learn the skills, you can do whatever, but it's who you are as a person that's really going to differentiate yourself. If you're that person who likes to goof off every now and then and break the ice and give everybody a chuckle when when it's a super stressful time, power to that, and be comfortable with who you are. So that would be the one biggest thing that I would tell anybody who's getting ready to go into the workplace.
Fantastic. Anybody else like to jump in? Or should we move on to our next question? Should we move on? Okay.
I have one.
Yeah, sure.
I've really struggled with what kinds of jobs to take and whether it was better to just take any job, whether or not people might see me if I was working at the bookstore. Would that affect what I was doing? Would people think I wasn't worthy of a marketing job if I took something in between? I had a lot of angst and worry about those things. And what I want to tell people is if you need to eat, take whatever job you need to be able to eat. You can volunteer. This is a long, long time you're going to be working, and there will be opportunities, and you can show yourself through volunteer work, by taking extra courses and reading books and finding other ways to stretch. And so if you feel that you're taking a job and it might be beneath you, people are going to see that you're working. And if you make the decision that you don't want to work and you want to focus on volunteer, if you have that opportunity, that's okay too. But don't worry so much. Just find a plan and just keep moving and take care of your mental health. That's another big piece. So.
Yeah, I do a really quick follow-up to that, which is I think a lot of the time we think if you want to build a great career when you're a student, you think I have to work at the best companies. And one of the things that I learned through co-op and through my early experiences is that sometimes the companies that seem less sexy are the places where you'll get the best experience. You know, we often kind of glorify certain environments. For me, I really wanted to work in an agency, something like that. Originally thought it was broadcast journalism, but that didn't work out. But you often can get a broader range of experience in places that are a little smaller, places that are a little farther from downtown, places you maybe haven't heard of. So be okay with that. And like Andrea said, you'll be working for many decades, unless you win the lottery. So, you know, there's no rush.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you for that. Question number 2 that have come in. Do you have any specific tips when getting interviewed for a marketing or sales position? So more interview focused.
Yeah, I'll just take that one there. So I think it's, you know, specifically for marketing and communication, but just overall, I think it's really important that whatever interview you get, or, you know, whoever the company that you're interviewing with, that you do a little bit of pre-research on the company and the role itself. So, and you can showcase your marketing and communication skills that way too, because and employers, whether they're the recruiter or the hiring manager, they know that you're not going to know all the answers and you're not going to know the 4 pillars of TELUS or all the philosophies, but it just, you stand out because, you know, I've been doing a lot of interviews lately, and it's very rare that they'll, like, you know, take the time to actually research about TELUS, like not even the role itself, but just the company itself, right? So, but if you do that, and you know your stuff, or you look like you know your stuff, because you're following the trend in the company and the competitive landscape, that will go a long way, and yeah, the employers will like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, prepare, right? Like, I mean, that's something that we all assume is common sense, but please prepare, do your research. If you've got a colleague at a company and you're interviewing with that company and they tell you don't worry about it, please worry about it. Like, do your due diligence, do your research, delve a little bit deeper and find out things that, you know, that are not readily available on the company website, right? For any position essentially that you're applying to, but specifically for marketing and communications too. Adam?
Yeah, I want to add one thing and then I'll shut up because I'm talking too much. But I absolutely second that. When you are doing a job application, I'm reviewing like 200 of them right now, and I wish I could hire everyone. It is immediately, especially when there's that many candidates, immediately apparent when someone has or hasn't done their research with their cover letter. Or with the questions that they're answering as part of the application process. So if you want to increase your chances, just like was just said, do your research about a company and make it apparent you've done that right in the first line, that cover letter. because you will stand out. So many cover letters, people use the exact same one for every job, or lots of job applications now ask you additional questions nowadays, and a lot of them feel very generic. So the more effort you put into each one, personalizing, targeting, researching, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And what really resonates with you about working or wanting to work for that organization, right? It goes back to that research piece. Absolutely. And, with respect to interviews, it's really about being able to connect the dots for the recruiter. So when you go in for an interview, they want, they call you in for a reason, right? They already like you. They already want to see you succeed. So it's about creating that essence for the recruiter to really visualize you in the role and being able to really articulate your relevant and transferable skills and competencies, which we spend a great deal, coaching a lot of our students on. So that's quite important too, and being able to articulate those skill sets. Great. Question 3, how can art and social science students or non-business students get into the marketing field? Any non-business students who broke into marketing? Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I think for that question, I mean, for just looking at my team here, or the colleagues in marketing and across TELUS, and the experience I've had in marketing teams as well, I don't really think there's like a discrimination or a difference between the business or non-business students. It's about the skill set and what you have to offer, right? So really, when you're going for the interview, or when you're putting your resume in a cover letter, that's what you say there, and what you put as the headline is most important. When I, for example, I'll just personally, my opinion, right? It's like when I'm interviewing and when I'm screening resumes with the recruiter that's on our team, I'm not necessarily looking exactly for business title or not, or business degree or not. It's about what their experience is more like, whether it's from a volunteering perspective, or real work experience or co-op. That's what I'm looking for more, not necessarily what exact courses or degree that they took, right? So that's just my opinion.
Great, thank you. Awesome. So moving on to the next question, digital marketing seems to be all the rage in Canada. Any tips on some courses, topics, and/or technologies to learn from the experts in the room? Andrea, I think
I would go through the HubSpot Academy courses. They're free. They break down the sales and marketing process. So that would be one recommendation. I'd also get a copy of, it's kind of an old book, but the strategies are still sound. Get a copy of Solution Selling and find out how to help people understand a vision for something better. And honestly, you can use that in all parts of your life. And I've seen people pivot and use those same skills in therapy and in career coaching and life coaching. It's a good competency to have there, but yeah, have a look at what's online. HubSpot's excellent, but Google Academy as well, and they're free. And I also encourage people to go do the Gender-Based Analysis Plus that the federal government sponsors. More and more employers are looking for that. And for Indigenous cultural safety training is something that is going to be very important, as well as other inclusion initiatives. And make sure you know how to speak and address people, learn how to use pronouns and make space for people. Adam might, or Jessica or Tony might have some suggestions too.
I can't follow you again. I can't look at after you. No, that's great.
Amazing. I feel the same, Adam. Great. So how would you recommend networking with people in companies and roles you're interested in? I'm about to graduate in 2021, and I have been trying to message people on LinkedIn, and I'm not having much luck. What else should I do?
For me, when I was actually trying to network or get my foot in the door, LinkedIn and the kind of those channels are good, but also you'd be surprised how much information you can find on the actual companies, like websites about us, or meet our staff, or meet our team. And so if you're really passionate and interested in a specific role, and you know what that team kind of leads up to, you can often find those people on the company website. So I would find their email addresses, or take a wild guess, first dot last name. I've tried that before. First dot last name at thecompany.com, and shoot direct emails and personalized messages. Right. Do not copy and paste the same one for everyone. Make sure you personalize it, and you're delivering that message clearly. But it should just be more so the communication also about you wanting to learn and genuinely meet that person for a coffee chat virtually, right? It's not about, hey, I'm graduating and I want a job, and do you have any openings? It's not that. We much prefer, for example, if you're passionate about the role and industry, and you want to learn about it, then that's where it starts, right? And it can evolve into potentially a full-time job or et cetera, right? So yeah.
What Tony is describing is what I do, honestly, on a day-to-day basis. I reach out to prospects, and I more less of there isn't a better word other than creep them, and try to figure out what is actually relevant to them, and how do you cut through the clutter. I'm sure a lot of people such as Adam, who's looking at 200 resumes a day, probably gets a lot of requests, and how do I make it a little bit more personal to them? Trying out the emails, going directly to them. And I agree, about not doing the same message to everybody, because they talk, they're like, hey, did you get a message from so-and-so? What did they say? And they're definitely gonna compare it. So I would also go to them and be very pointed with the ask. Like Tony said, you're not asking for a job. You're trying to understand if this is a good fit for you. I think that's one of the biggest shifts that students can take when they're looking for a job, is that you are looking for they're looking for a good fit as much as you're looking for a good fit. Do I want this person as my manager? Do I see myself in this kind of corporate culture? Is this somewhere that I'm actually going to thrive and where I'm going to learn a lot, rather than just, I remember definitely being a desperate student, just being like, I'll take any job that comes my way. But after being in the workforce for a bit, there are definitely bosses that I will not work for, and I would not take that job. So I think it's actually really empowering for students to take that mentality and going, is this going to be a good fit for me? Because I think an employer will also know that, this person's actually seriously considering this role, not just for the income aspect of it, but for a personal fit. Because again, back to what I said, at the end of the day, they're hiring you as a person, not so much your capabilities or your skills that come along. Yes, absolutely. But it's that person, it's that personality and the drive behind it, and why you want to do something. So as much as you can demonstrate that, I would put that forward.
I would also encourage people to jump in and take virtual greeting roles. You think of when you go to a job fair or IABC I used to go to, and one of the tips I got early on was offer to be one of the people who says hello at the door. There are ways to do that virtually, but the great thing is that it establishes you to everyone who comes through the door as someone who volunteers, and they're more likely to remember you. And even if you're not in that role, even if you're online, if you're someone who helps point out that maybe somebody else didn't get asked as many questions, or you see someone who's kind of nervous, or two people who are sort of off on the side, can you connect the two of them? There are ways to do that virtually, and we're all kind of fumbling through that right now, but find ways to make yourself a safe person who helps others, and that will create goodness. So.
Absolutely. And I think another piece is, once you have that particular individual who, does a virtual coffee chat, for instance, with you, you can leverage that connection, right? It's kind of, think about it like a chain. So at the end of your time with that individual, you can say, thank you so much for your time. I learned so much from you, and thank you for sharing your expertise. I was wondering if you can connect me with somebody out of your network of colleagues and peers, and kind of start that chain from there on. So you don't have to continuously think that you have to reinvent the wheel, but if you do actually find somebody who is willing and interested in taking you up on that offer, then you can leverage that connection too. But again, great question. And I think it's just being patient. A lot of us, a lot of companies, a lot of individuals in the field are, again, still trying to navigate the unknown, right? For the individuals that you're reaching out to in the organization, they don't have to be the senior managers. You don't have to connect with those individuals. You can even connect connect with people who are in a completely different department than you want to work for. Connect with somebody in a different department, learn about the organization, learn about professional development opportunities, ask more of, not tailored questions that's specific to the role that you want to move into, but then maybe leverage that connection and have them introduce you to somebody else who might be in a marketing department. So those might be some ways that you can start to navigate and combat, that lull that you're experiencing right now. But, graduating in 2021, you've got a long way to go, and feel free to book an appointment with a career advisor so we can coach you through some of those opportunities as well. Okay, great. Jessica, this question is specifically for you. Do you have any advice on how to maintain relationships with people you connect with online?
That's a good question. I think you want to find common area that you guys can kind of connect about. And if there's any kind of interesting things, it doesn't have to be work related, being like, hey, saw this article, just wanted to share it. Take that relationship that you're building on a very professional basis and try to put more of yourself into it. And so, because then that kind of creates more conversation items as well. And also remember, at the end of the day, everybody loves to talk about themselves, and use that to your advantage. Ask them what's this quarter like? I remember going to ramen with my referral from Salesforce at the end of our Q4, which is for anybody the craziest time of the year. And he looked like he hadn't slept in 4 days, but he was like, yeah, we'll go to ramen. And I was like, what is it like? And he told me about his deals, and I'm sure he enjoyed telling me about it. And I enjoyed learning about it in terms of, what that's like. So I think at the end of the day, just be curious about what somebody's day-to-day is. Don't just ask one question. You're like, what is that like? Or, how is that different? And you're going to get a lot out of someone, because even through this, we're just talking about ourselves here, and definitely enjoying myself.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And the very last question that have come in, directed towards Andrea. It seems you were very successful at building your personal brand, and thank you for sharing some tips on how to do so. What advice would you give for those of us who don't really know what we want to brand ourselves as yet?
I would say continue to flatter me like that. That is very helpful. I appreciate that. What can you do? I read a lot of books on creating a brand. I worked in marketing, so that's part of it. But I was one of the first people in Vancouver with a website. I was one of the first bloggers, one of the first people on social media. So looking for those new technologies and spaces and getting online and posting. At one point, I was posting to my blog at least once a day. You got to start somewhere and start posting on LinkedIn, even if it's sharing an article, or retweet things that you like from other people. Start small. And I would encourage you to go look on YouTube for people who talk about building brands and read some books. The brand called You was one that I learned a lot from at one point, but there's a lot more recent stuff. And I think too, Brene Brown has some excellent videos on authenticity. And I kind of resisted her stuff for a long time, because I'm like, I can't tell people what my life is like. At the beginning of this pandemic, I was terrified of going on Zoom, because I had a meeting at one point that had gone kind of sideways, and I wouldn't come on Zoom. I wouldn't talk with people, but the pandemic happened. And I found myself on the 6 o'clock news and a lot of other places right away, and leading groups. And now I do almost all my work on Zoom. And I wouldn't have told you that at the beginning of the pandemic. I would have thought you'd all judge me. Now I think it's kind of a cool story. And I can manage. I was worried about things like my groceries that just showed up. That stressed me out 6 months ago. Now I'm like, that's fine. I'll just set it and go and get it. So you can build your brand, but you can do it by being authentic, and you don't have to hide who you are. That's why people will want you. People will hire you because they want to work with you. So just lean into who you are. And that's where your brand is going to come from, because if you build a brand that isn't about you, people are going to notice. So just figure out who you are and your values and connect to other people who share them.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Andrea. And Brene Brown, like she is just phenomenal. That's somebody to definitely keep an eye out for in terms of the resources. Great. So we've talked a great deal about relationships, about LinkedIn, staying connected with industry professionals. So I would encourage the attendees to connect with our panelists and stay engaged. Again, I just want to thank you, Andrea, Adam, Jessica, and Tony for providing your expertise today to help us navigate the sales marketing communication. For our attendees, if you're looking for help exploring career options, polishing your resume, editing your cover letter, and or finding meaningful volunteer opportunities, feel free to book an appointment with the career services at SFU. We hope that you enjoyed our sales marketing communications panel for today, and thank you again from the bottom of my heart to all of our panelists for being here today and sharing your expert knowledge with us. This concludes our session for the day, and I hope everybody has an amazing evening. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.